Hello, good evening. Happy New Year, if it's not too late to say it. Welcome to the first Politics Hub of 2025. Now, today we're talking about grooming gangs and the rape and abuse of girls that took place in towns across the UK. And look, I've thought quite a lot about how to open this show because over the last week, there's been lies and disinformation. There's been politics, so much politics, mudslinging, weaponisation, the lot. But there is a reason that this was able to happen. Because people rightly feel that an appalling child abuse scandal took place in this country and there's been a lack of accountability. The recommendations of the public inquiry into the scandal haven't been implemented. Nobody's lost their job. And frankly, there can be no assurance that this couldn't happen again or that this isn't happening still. Yes, some of the perpetrators have been locked up, but this is also a story about our institutions turning a blind eye, whether social services or the police, the people who were supposed to be looking after these vulnerable girls that could have saved them, treating them like the criminal rather than the victim. So what's changed since then? Has anything changed? We'll be asking on tonight's show. We'll also speak to the Health Minister, Stephen Kinnock, who tells me the government will now implement all of the inquiry's recommendations. First, let's listen to our political editor, Beth Rigby, who has tonight's first report.
The tinsel's still up, but the season of peace and goodwill long gone. The PM at a hospital in Surrey. A new year, but the same old challenges. How to relaunch his agenda with so many noisy distractions.
Do you need to take that? Yeah, definitely.
What today was meant to be about, his big plan to cut hospital waiting lists. More local hubs and more involvement from the private sector.
I welcome a new agreement that will expand the relationship between the NHS and the private healthcare sector. That's more beds, more operations, more care, available to the NHS, treating patients free at the point of use, targeted at where we need them most.
But the PM's plans overshadowed by vicious attacks from the world's richest man. Elon Musk using his social media platform X to launch an onslaught against the PM, accusing him of being complicit in the rape of Britain for failing to tackle grooming gangs, while personally attacking one of Starmer's ministers. He called your safeguarding minister, Jess Phillips, an evil witch, a rape genocide apologist who should be put in jail. Does that sort of abuse of a minister make you feel angry? And what is your response to that?
Those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible, they're not interested in victims. They're interested in themselves. Jess Phillips has done 1,000 times more than they've even dreamt about when it comes to protecting victims of sexual abuse throughout her entire career. I'm prepared to call out this for what it is.
Typically reserved, today the Prime Minister impassioned.
What I won't tolerate is politicians jumping on the bandwagon simply to get attention, when those politicians sat in government for 14 long years, tweeting, talking, but not doing anything about it. Now so desperate for attention that they're amplifying what the far right is saying.
But the Conservatives doubling down and promising a push in the Commons for a national inquiry.
Keir Starmer's claims this morning are absolutely disgraceful. It is not correct to brand as far right people who are raising legitimate concerns about the systemic, organised gang rape of vulnerable young girls.
This wasn't the start to the year that Number 10 expected, but far from being knocked off course. I'm told it was a deliberate choice by the Prime Minister to wade into this row, partly because he's angry about the safety risks it's posing for his MPs, but also because, in the words of one ally, he's authentically passionate about tackling child sexual exploitation and simply wasn't prepared to duck the issue. To that end, the government today announced plans to strengthen laws on child sexual abuse, but that's unlikely to calm a row that's as much about personalities and populism as policy. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, Beth here, Ashish Joshi, our health editor, are also here. Beth, there's a lot for us to get into. But first, let's talk about the NHS, shall we? This is what they were supposed to talk about. The grid said they were going to talk about. What's the announcement there?
The announcement is that the government has unveiled how it's going to meet its target of 92% of all patients being seen within the 18-week timeframe. This has been talked about and trailed pre-election, early weeks into the government, and now we've actually got some detail how it's going to do that. Community diagnostic hubs, centres on the high street, bringing treatment back into the community. These walk-in centres equipped with MRI scanners, CT scanners, blood tests, everything that you'd expect in a really good hospital without having to visit a crumbling NHS estate. These are on the high street. You walk in. There are already 165 of these centres available. Now they're going to crank up the capacity. 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, these centres will be open. These will be supported by surgical hubs. These are like F1 pit stops. Patients go in, operated, and out the other end. And it's like a conveyor belt, a succession of patients going through. So all of these announcements being made today. And the only problem for the government at the moment is there is no increase in the workforce, right? And they've got to find the premises to build these community diagnostic centres in, not build them from scratch, but use existing buildings. That is the only warning, and that is the only caveat. And this is what the Royal College of Physicians had to say to me earlier.
It's great, and it addresses a number of the issues that patients, carers, our clinicians have been saying about personalised, streamlined care. But we need to invest in our workforce as well to get the plan to work and be effective. But as well as the workforce, it's more having the right, kind of resources, whether it's our estates, whether it's having the IT infrastructure.
Thanks, Ashish. I mean, that was what the government was expecting to talk about today. Although, Beth, I thought it was quite interesting to hear you say that it was an active decision by Keir Starmer to make an intervention on this today. And he sounded pretty passionate, I have to say, when he spoke to you.
Yeah, it was interesting today because obviously they wanted to come into the new year talking about NHS waiting lists. They've been working on this clearly for weeks. And then the Prime Minister on the first day back in, after New Year's Eve is faced with this blazing row over grooming gangs, historic sexual abuse of children, and then these vicious attacks on Jess Phillips, and someone has been charged for malicious communication to her, the Prime Minister saying today that she is under threat because of some of these attacks on her. Now, often in these cases, Keir Starmer will just swerve this and say, thank you for the question, that's not what I'm here to talk about. But his team told me that he took a deliberate decision today to face into this and to take it on, which I wasn't necessarily expecting him to do. And he did it in a way, I have to say, was the most impassioned I have seen him for many, many months. I think the last time I saw him speak in that way was actually party conference, not last year, but the year before, when he did a really passionate speech about why he wanted to become Prime Minister and told his backstory. And I'd say a few things about it, although I've probably gone on too long already, Sophie, but the first thing is, why did he do it? Why did he decide to go in on Musk and attack this stuff going on social media, having swerved all of it for months? Number one, I think there was a direct decision related to Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, who has been called a genocide rape apologist, who Musk says should be in prison, who's been called evil, who's been called a wicked witch. And that abuse has led to threats on her. So I think that there was a safeguarding issue that he felt that as Prime Minister he had to defend his MPs, and he had to call out this behaviour, so point one. I think the second thing is that he feels quite strongly that he did do a lot of work around this when he was Director of Public Prosecutions. Now, some of the criticisms have gone back to the Rotherham case, and back in, I think, 2009 or 10, it was decided that prosecutions couldn't go ahead because lawyers thought that the victims were not going to be credible witnesses. Yeah? So it's not without base that these claims are happening, and there is this anger about this. But Keir Starmer feels very strongly that there is disinformation about what happened, what he did, and he wanted to defend his record. And also, you know, he made the point that there have been many reviews, and he talked about the J Review. I think, thirdly, the other issue was about standards in public life. And I think that talking to his team, there was a view within Number 10 that the Prime Minister has to lead on standards in public life. And if he doesn't actually grasp the nettle and do it, who will? And you heard him talk in one of his answers where he spoke about how he said a few months ago, if MP had been abused, like Jess Phillips had been abused by Elon Musk, politicians from all sides would have called that out, and this time that didn't happen. And he said, what is happening about standards in public life? And he said, it's about truth and it's about calling this stuff out, and it still matters. So I think those were the reasons that he did it. I do still think there is a credible case to argue about whether there needs to be a bigger inquiry. Jay herself, who did the recommendations and the review in 2022, said there was an endemic abuse system going on in England. So I don't think the row is going to go away. But I think for a Prime Minister that has been, shall we say, embattled in recent months, he has actually come out at the beginning of 2025 fighting in a way that perhaps I wouldn't have expected him to.
Really interesting stuff. Thank you both very much indeed, Beth and Ashish there. Well, a little earlier I spoke with the Health Minister, Stephen Kinnock. I do want to give a warning because given the nature of the subject we were discussing and my own view that we should be talking about the details, some of what we discussed in the interview, some viewers may find upsetting. Thank you so much for being with us. Good to have you here. I'm keen, of course, to talk about your NHS announcement. But before we do, I just want to speak about the grooming gangs, the rape gangs scandal, and also separately the comments made by Elon Musk and the Prime Minister's response today. Just firstly, what is your message to Elon Musk?
Well, I think a lot has been said on this very, very serious issue. There is nothing more serious and more sickening than child sexual abuse. And I think we have to just really acknowledge and register the fact that we're dealing with a really serious and sensitive issue. And I think that the way in which the debate is conducted should reflect that. I think that what Mr. Musk has said about Keir Starmer's record and Jess Phillips' record are just plainly wrong. That nobody has done more than Keir and Jess to address these issues. Keir has done so much to lock up rapists, wife beaters, people guilty of sexual abuse, and Jess has done so much throughout her whole life and career, professional life and career, to stand up for the victims and particularly on violence against women and girls. So I think I would gently say to Mr. Musk that he really does need to look at the information that he's putting out onto social media and let's deal with the facts. And what is absolutely clear is that Keir Starmer and Jess Phillips have the strongest possible record on these issues.
I want to talk about the substantive issue, the important issue, in a moment. But, Keir Starmer said that the lies that you describe them as lies, kind of whipped up on X, are now threatening the safety of MPs like Jess Phillips. The UK government is still on X. Should you be?
Well, look, I think we all enjoy and appreciate the cut and thrust of politics, and it is about having a robust debate. And whatever your views on social media has become a forum for political debate. And so I'm not sure
but
that
we're
just
talking specifically about the person who is now in charge of X, linked to the new administration coming into the United States as well. Keir Starmer says he's spreading lies. You saying he's spreading on lies. Why are you on his platform?
I think we're in politics to take people on, take the argument on, have the debate, and to demonstrate through our actions and through our words that we have the values and the plan to actually deliver for the British people. And I think many of the people in our country that are observing the sort of volley of stuff that's coming from the other side of the Atlantic are thinking, well, I'm actually far more interested in how we're going to get the NHS backlog down, how we're going to get some growth back into our economy, how we're going to fix our broken justice system, how we're going to fix our broken justice system, how we're going to rebuild the country's infrastructure. You know, those are the issues that people in the country really care about.
OK. Let's talk about the issue here, the important issue, the grooming gangs. And I've been thinking about this a bit because it's quite hard as a broadcaster to give the real truth about how bad some of that abuse was because the details are so graphic. You know, girls have been murdered. To use one example, when one 12-year-old threatened a perpetrator after she was raped, he took a baseball bat, he hit her with it around the head, and he then sexually assaulted her with it. That's just one example. But, you know, these girls were groomed, they were raped, they were treated like meat, and the people who were supposed to be looking after them, social services, the police, the justice system, but particularly those people supposed to be looking after them, they turned a blind eye. Could this still be happening now?
Look, all the abuse that's taken place and that example and so many others, Sophie, are just utterly heartbreaking. And we have to put in place the measures that are in the Alexis J report. Alexis J did a very detailed, well-researched piece of work. It took 8 years to pull it together. It pulled together the strands from all the different local investigations that have taken place. And what we need to do is start working on implementing that. And it's frankly shameful that that report was tabled in 2022 and nothing was done. Not a single one of its recommendations was picked up. Keir Starmer has been calling for mandatory reporting on sex abuse for 10 years.
Let's keep the politics out of it. You know, there's been an awful lot of politics in the debate as well. So you're saying you're going to implement all the recommendations of the J report? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is my understanding, that we're committed to implementing those recommendations.
So when are you going to do it? Because some of them you can do right now, like a children's minister that attends cabinet. You can just do that tomorrow, right? Why don't you do it tomorrow?
We're working at pace on them, and you know, there's a lot of work that's going on. The lead department is the Home Office. They are working and they are prioritising these issues. It is absolutely vital that we have justice, accountability, and measures in place to ensure that this kind of thing never happens again, and the government is 100% committed to delivering that.
You say that there doesn't need to be a public inquiry because there already has been one. You talk about the Alexis J report. But what some people are worried about is the Alexis J report wasn't just about grooming gangs. It was about child abuse widely. It was about Jimmy Savile. It was about abuse in the Catholic Church. It mentioned Rotherham once. It didn't mention Telford at all. You know, there were specific issues with this scandal that impacted so many girls in lots of towns across the UK, and it was about the authorities turning a blind eye, potentially because of the ethnicity of the men who were carrying out this abuse, because they were British Pakistani predominantly. Should there not be a public inquiry into that?
Well, there were local investigations and reviews, reports, inquiries into those localised incidents.
But that's the whole point. It wasn't just a localised issue, was it? You know, it went across the country.
Yeah, but the J report pulls those issues together. It connects the dots, and it makes national recommendations. But
it was so wide-ranging. We're talking about Jimmy Savile. I mean, I'm not saying that wasn't very important. That was very important. But it's very different, isn't it, to, you know, these girls who were vulnerable, who were let down by the authorities, who were picked off, and about, I guess, what many people would see, political correctness that stopped them being listened to.
We don't see the case for going back to square one. You could end up, you know, distracting and having to reprioritise resources that are currently being deployed to actually deliver the recommendations of the J report. Let's get those practical, tangible measures in place. Let's ensure that those practical, tangible measures take root and work, so we start to see the systemic change, the culture change that we need to see. Of course, if we then see, as any responsible government would be vigilant, would monitor, if things are not working as they should, if there are gaps that need to be filled, then, of course, you commission more work and you get the job done.
We know those gaps are there. We know it because the 2022 inquiry into child sexual exploitation said an accurate picture of the prevalence of child sexual exploitation could not be gleaned from either criminal justice or children's social care data. Any denial of the scale of child sexual exploitation, either at local or national level, should be challenged. It's still a problem now, isn't it?
Well, I think that the report is comprehensive. I think that, of course, when you get into the technical detail of how those measures get implemented, you'll get a much better sense then of what you may need to change, what you may need to go back to and review.
Can you guarantee
but if
that
you just leave
young
a vacuum,
girls in that situation now are safe? You can't, because the data isn't there.
Well, very sadly, there are people in our society who do sick and perverted things. I would love to live in a world where that didn't happen. The job of the government is to bear down on that, to do our very best to eradicate it from our society. And our view is that the practical and rapid and tangible way of taking this forward is through the J recommendations. But, of course, you always leave the door open to making any changes and improvements that might be needed further down the line.
You mentioned accountability a bit earlier in the interview and how important accountability was. Who's lost their jobs over this?
Well, that, I think, is a really important question, both for all of those who have been involved in the cases and in the investigations. I don't think it's right for me to sit here and name names or make individual accusations or allegations. But when you've got a system that is robust, accountability is a really important part of that system.
This feels to me, I understand that people feel this has been weaponised, but the reason it has been is because people feel that there hasn't been justice, that there hasn't been change, and that there hasn't been accountability. No one's lost their jobs. Social workers turned a blind eye. Police turned a blind eye. Where's the accountability? Who's gone? It's extraordinary.
With respect, I do think that that's a question for previous Conservative politicians who were in government for 14 years and did absolutely nothing about this issue.
You can do something now.
Yeah, that's right, and we are working at pace. We have said that we will implement the recommendations. You didn't even get that commitment from the previous Conservative administration. So, I think we're saying, look, we're picking up on a broken system due to the neglect and incompetence of the last 14 years. We've been in power for about 6 months now. Of course, there is a lot more to do, and the government is trying to get the system up and running across so many different areas of our justice system, but also our National Health Service, the economy. There's a lot going on, but this is absolutely a priority, and the Home Office is leading on it. OK, let's talk about the NHS, shall we? You've got a big announcement today. What is it? So the big announcement today is around fixing the backlog. We've got over 6 million people waiting for planned treatments, whether it's diagnostics or an operation or some other medical intervention. That is completely unsustainable. So the question is, how do you clear that backlog? And there are a range of very practical measures that we're putting forward today. For example, paying GPs to do much better referrals so that people can stay in the community when they're treated. It's about improving the app so that people can do much more around diagnostics and getting information through the app. It's about improving the appointments process so that you're getting a reminder the day before your appointment to make sure that you go, like, you see that in restaurants, and that's going to improve the number of people going in and getting appointments. And another important part of it is about harnessing the independent sector. So the independent sector has capability to do another 1 million elective interventions. We want that to focus on gynecology, on orthopaedics, and on ear, nose and throat. We are absolutely not ideological about working in partnership with the independent sector so that we can ensure that we don't have a two-tier health system. So the private sector shouldn't be a dirty word then when it comes to the NHS? Look, we absolutely have to recognise that we've got to move quickly, and we've also got to stop this two-tier system. Right now, there are a lot of people who are, because they've got the financial means to do it, they're jumping the queue and they're using the private sector. What we want to do is level the playing field. So the NHS is doing a deal with the private sector to enable the use of the capacity that exists in the private sector, which is going to have a major impact on, particularly on those three areas. So we don't want the independent sector to be cherry picking. We're saying orthopaedics, gynecology and ear, nose and throat, where there's a lot more work that can be done more rapidly.
You say there that there's a two-tier system where people are jumping the queue. Is it morally wrong to jump the queue?
I don't think it's morally wrong, but I think it's wrong for any government to stand idly by and watch that happen. We need to level the playing field. Working people across the country should have the access at the same speed as everybody else. The principle of the NHS is that it's need that determines the treatment you get, not your ability to pay. That was a founding principle of Aneurin Bevan's NHS in the Attlee government after the Second World War, and that principle, I'm afraid, has been, if not completely broken, certainly bent a long way towards being broken over the last 14 years, and we want to level the playing field and enable people to have access to the treatment that they need.
Just finally, if you want to hit your target of 92% of elective patients getting the all clear within 18 weeks, you're going to need staff to implement this, right? What's your plan around that? I mean, are you considering relaxing visa requirements, for example?
So we want to define the model of care, define the way that our system works, and then get the staff and the resources that you need. That's the right way to do it. Don't put the cart before the horse. We're going to bring forward a workforce plan in the summer that will set out clearly how we're going to staff our community diagnostic hubs, how we're going to staff the surgical hubs, how we're going to deliver on the commitment, as you say, to get to 92% waiting 18 weeks or less from referral to treatment. That is an extremely challenging target. We also have our manifesto pledge of 40,000 additional elective appointments per week, 2 million by July of this year. Hold us to account on that. Those are the promises that we've made to the British people, and that's what we have to deliver. We absolutely have to have a workforce that can deliver on that, but a big part of what we've said today is also about freeing up capacity, improving productivity. So even just with the workforce we have, we genuinely believe that we can actually free people up and get them working in more effective ways so that we can start to bear down on the backlog.
OK, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sophie.
Right, let's bring in our duo for this evening, shall we, to discuss this man, Keir Starmer, the Conservative MP and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kwasi Kwarteng, and the Observer's chief leader writer, Sonia Sodha. Great to have you both
It was a former MP.
Former MP. I did actually, sorry. Oh, my goodness.
It's actually illegal to describe yourself,
Oh,
isn't
no,
it?
I'm not going to get to jail, am I? Blimey, that'd be a good way to start the new year, wouldn't it? Thanks for the correction.
Okay,
Very
good.
important correction as well. And great to have you both here. Look, the NHS announcement is obviously really, really important, but I do just want to talk about the grooming scandal, about the online row that we've seen. Sonia, I'm interested to get your take on this, because there's lots of different opinions. What's your view on it?
It's a very, very important conversation. I still remember in 2014 reading the Rotherham Inquiry report and how horrified I felt at reading the details of what had happened. So it's a very important conversation, and I do think it's become a political football, but I also think that mustn't mean that we shut it down and we don't talk about the substance. And what I will say is that I think there's lots that Labour ministers are saying that I agree with, which is in terms of there's so much to do. I've written a lot about child sexual abuse.
Yeah.
I've written about the grooming gangs. I've also written about...
You've done a lot on it, right?
Other kinds of child sexual abuse. And we are failing across the board on it. And there are some very important recommendations that came out of Alexis Jay's independent inquiry onto child sex abuse. And they're totally right that the first priority must be implementing those recommendations to ensure that children are safe. Because I will say, I don't think children are safe in our society from child sexual abuse, whether it is organised rape by groups of men, whether it is institutional child sex abuse, or whether it is child sex abuse in the family context. Children are not safe from that. 500,000 children, we think, experience child sexual abuse a year, and we are nowhere near good enough as a society at tackling it. So they are right on that. Where I take a little bit more issue, I think, in what what Keir Starmer's been saying and what some other Labour ministers have been saying, is that we have had this very important independent inquiry. there was an investigation on child sex abuse and rape by groups of men. It didn't really draw together, actually, the findings of lots of local investigations and reviews on grooming gangs. I think it's important to say grooming gangs is only one part of it. There's also paedophile rings, and actually the language of it tends to be quite racialised because we tend to use paedophile rings to talk about gangs of white men and grooming gangs to talk about gangs of Asian men. That is not to say that race was not an issue with the grooming gangs, because it clearly was. Reports have shown that in terms of the way that the authorities responded. But it didn't draw together that. And if you are the victim, if you're one of... And the scale of what happened in Rotherham is incredible. 1,400 girls, mostly working-class girls, who were just treated like dirt by the system, as well as horrifically by the men who raped them. If you were one of those victims, I wouldn't read the independent inquiry report and think someone has drawn... Like, you wouldn't have a sense of the scale like you do with the infected blood scandal. So I don't know if it's a statutory inquiry, but there is definitely more work to do on understanding the scale of what went on. And I think, yes, on the accountability as well, because we know that some people have lost their job in places like Rotherham and Rochdale, but it would be good for it to be drawn together. I don't know if it's a statutory inquiry. I think that is important alongside actioning the recommendations. So I just think both sides maybe have got a bit... Not Elon Musk. But I think people on both sides have sort of got a bit of a point here.
So you're right, I think it's been far too politicised. But you've got to look at actually the substance of what happened, and you touched on it in your interview. But it's an absolute scandal. I can't think of a worse scandal, actually, in my lifetime. You had young girls, and it was over decades. It wasn't just in the 3 years, you know, when they looked at the Rotherham the situation there. It was over decades. And the big suspicion that people out there you know, are thinking is that the reason why nothing happened, and this is simplistic, but this is what they see, people see, is that there was the race element. And that people, and the suspicion is that the authorities wanted to put what they would call community cohesion ahead of the safety and protection of these young girls. And if that's the case, that's a scandal, because one of the key principles of justice is that it's colourblind. So whatever, you know, if a crime has been committed, it doesn't matter who the perpetrator is, it doesn't matter what their ethnicity is, they should be held to account. And the suspicion here is that people turned a blind eye because of the ethnic, racial element to these crimes. And I think that's a scandal. Justice should be equal-handed and look at people, treat people exactly the same way.
I said in the interview that I want to take the politics out of it, but it is political, obviously, as well. What Labour would say is a bit rich coming from the Conservatives, who didn't do anything, who didn't implement the recommendations, why they're having a go at us.
So, look, I think this is one of the problems we have with politics, is that we're just doing the yah-boo, criticising each other.
They've got a point on that, though,
But this scandal happened over decades. It was something that was happening in the 90s. The lady, the young girl who was killed and her family were killed, that was in 2000. 2000, so it's 24 years ago. So both parties, I think, have failed on this. And you've got to be able to put your hand up and say that. And actually, that's what Kemi Badenoch is saying. She's saying that, you know, it's been a failure of the system, and both main parties bear some measure of responsibility for it.
How do you think Keir Starmer should respond to Elon Musk?
I mean, it's really difficult because in some ways, I mean, I think he handled it very well today, and he's right to call... Like, it's difficult because you've got to, as you said, talk about the substance of this very, very serious issue. And at the same time, it can't be allowed to pass unsaid some of the things that Elon Musk is saying about ministers like Jess Phillips. I mean, it is not only misinformation, it is abusive, and it's dangerous abuse.
So I think...
it does need to be called out.
Look, I think you're right about that. I think he did something that was right and strong, and I think he did something that he was ill-judged. The first thing he did that was right was obviously calling out, because if your ministers in your own government are being attacked in a very personal, vicious way, as Prime Minister, I think he has to step up and defend them, and he did that. I think where he went wrong was to say that people are jumping on far-right talking points. Because this isn't a far-right issue. I mean, yes, people on the far-right may exploit it, but it's not far-right to be concerned about young girls being raped by gangs of men. That's something that everyone...
Yeah. Which is the point you make as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what most people... And I think, in a way, it's a shame that we're in this society where everyone sees things through the prism of race. I mean, if they were just, you know, from the white community or whatever other community, I don't think it would have been as toxic as an issue. But where you had legacy issues with the Muslim communities and other communities historically in the north, there were tensions there that people felt that they didn't want to inflame, and I think that was unfortunate.
And I mean, the thing I will say, because there were obviously kind of specific things around the grooming gangs, and we know race was an issue because, for example, Louise Casey, now Baroness Louise Casey, did a review into Rotherham in 2015, which found that race was an issue in the sense that people were scared of bringing it up, and people did try and bring it up, and there was this sort of silence because people were worried about being accused of racism. But there are common threads between the grooming gang scandals and the numerous inquiries we've had into institutional child sex abuse, whether it's in the church, whether it's in football clubs. And the common theme is that people don't believe children, they don't listen to children. And men get away with this stuff because they find things to hide behind, whether it is their race, whether it's the fact they're a priest. If we're talking about the abuse who went home in care homes in Lambeth Council, you know, there were men who got away with it because they were, you know, on the side of the angels when it came to politics, and they hid behind that. So there are some common themes. And another really important thing, I was shocked to find that social workers get hardly any training on child sexual abuse. It's a very difficult thing to identify and to raise and flag because there's so much societal stigma around it. No one's fixed that. Social workers still get hardly any training on child sexual abuse. If we were a society that took it seriously, they would get lots more training on it.
It's been a really, really interesting discussion. Thank you both very much indeed. Well, as we've been discussing, the grooming gangs story is a national scandal affecting some of the most vulnerable young girls in our communities. I've been speaking to Faye Maxted, the Chief Executive of the Survivors Trust, who is involved in the independent inquiry into child sex abuse. Thank you so much for being with us. You've been campaigning for action on the inquiry into the child sexual exploitation. I guess you must feel... What do you feel? Do you feel, relieved, frustrated that finally people are catching up with you?
I suppose, yes. I mean, I'm still waiting to hear actually what's going to happen. You know, we did start campaigning after the end of the inquiry, and the final report was published with the 20 recommendations. And as time went on and there seemed to be so little that was happening, we decided to, you know, we really needed to focus on the implementation of the recommendations and to promote the need for them. So the recommendations as a whole provide a really robust structure for change, and they cover every aspect of child protection and would make a radical difference to how we protect our children in this country.
Stephen Kinnock's just told me that the government's planning to introduce all of the recommendations. Do you think that they will? How optimistic are you?
Well, we will be really happy to work with the government to support them doing that. I think if the changes that were recommended, Minister for Children, National Child Protection Authority, will make a massive difference and will impact on all areas of child protection.
Some people are obviously calling for a second inquiry. And the reason that they're doing that is that they say that the J inquiry was too wide-ranging. It was looking at everything from, you know, Jimmy Savile to abuse in the Catholic Church to the specific issue of grooming gangs of predominantly British Pakistani men that many people turned a blind eye to. Do you have sympathy with this argument, that it was just too wide-ranging to really address the issue?
I have sympathy with any survivor who's out there thinking, you know, why wasn't my particular institution, why wasn't my issue subject of an investigation? And survivors do feel sidelined and not heard. So I've every sympathy for that. What I would say is that in all the investigations that took place and all the inquiries that they've been, the findings are so similar. And time and again, we come up against people who protect the institution they're in, protect the faith that they're in, therefore don't take action or are too afraid to take action. And so whilst I've got sympathy for wanting another statutory inquiry, it would take time. It would, it would take years before it reported back. I want to see action now. We've had an inquiry which looked at so many different aspects, so many different institutions and situations where children had been sexually abused, and found these similarities. So, we need accountability. We need changes in the law. We need changes in practice and policy and in the whole culture of how we respond to children. We've got a blueprint for that from ICSA in the 20 recommendations. I would really like to see those really implemented and see what change they make.
You talked there about accountability. And I guess one of the things that strikes me about this is that these girls were let down by the people who were supposed to be looking after them, the social workers or the police or people who were supposed to be caring for the most vulnerable people in our society. And they were basically treated like criminals a lot of the time themselves. They were not believed, they were looked down upon. Where is the accountability there? No one has actually lost their job over it, have they?
No, they haven't. And I think that I can really understand the anger behind that and the feeling of not being valued, of not being heard. This is why we need radical change. I think absolutely those girls were let down dreadfully and continue to be let down in some instances. And so I can understand absolutely the anger that's behind that. And my heart
just to come in there, because you say that some of those girls continue, or girls like them continue to be let down. Is this the issue, that this kind of abuse is still going on?
I think so. And I think this is why we need the inquiry, the ICSA inquiry recommendations implementing, because they touch on every aspect relating to child protection. And so it's a really robust framework. And heading that up with Minister for Children and National Child Protection Authority gives it that accountability. It would give it the authority and the power to make the changes and to oversee the implementation of the rest of the recommendations so that we can really drive that culture change that's needed.
What do you make of the row that's happened with Elon Musk? Do you think that this has been whipped up by the far right?
I don't know who's driving it. I just think it's a distraction. I'm more interested in how survivors are feeling. I don't think survivors out there care a fig what someone's saying. What they want is change. They want the recommendations put in place so that there is real change. And all the fighting and politicisation of the issue is really let's avoid that. Let's not think about that. There are more important things. It's the lives of children and ongoing safety of children that really matters.
OK, thank you very much indeed. It's been really good to talk to you today. Now to a tricky issue for one of the rising stars of Keir Starmer's cabinet. The anti-corruption minister and economic secretary to the Treasury, Tulip Siddiq, has referred herself to the government's ethics watchdog over alleged links to a Russian deal with her aunt, the former Bangladesh Prime Minister, and properties linked to her political party. Well, let's speak now to our political correspondent, Rob Powell, shall we? Rob, what's happened?
So there's been a steady drip of allegations around Tulip Siddiq, and I think that's why today she's decided to get the Standards Advisor involved to basically establish the facts of what went on. I think politically it gives the government an answer when they're confronted with these awkward questions. It's also a chance for her to clear her name. Of course, it could backfire if Laurie Magnus manages to find something. Essentially, all the allegations centre on links between Tulip Siddiq and a party in Bangladesh, a political party called the Awami League. Now, her aunt was Prime Minister of Bangladesh for around 20 years. She fled the country in August after an uprising there. She's still the leader of that party as well. And essentially what the stories that the newspapers have been reporting this weekend centre on is a series of properties they say were owned by people with links to that party that have links back to Tulip Siddiq. So there's a report about one property that was given to Tulip Siddiq that she now reportedly rents out, another that was given to her sister that she lived in for a while, another that she rents now. And in all of these cases, the papers say that the properties were or are owned by people with links to the Awami League, this Bangladeshi political party. Now, there's not necessarily anything categorically wrong about any of that, as long as it's all been declared properly and as long as any conflicts of interest have been addressed as well. The second strand to this is something that's going on in Bangladesh at the moment. There are legal proceedings, a court case filed by a political opponent of Tulip Siddique's aunt, the former Prime Minister, and also an anti-corruption probe as well. Now, the court documents which we've got hold of make some pretty extraordinary allegations that essentially Tulip Siddique's aunt, the ex-Prime Minister there, and members of her family, including Tulip Siddique, were involved in a deal with Russia to finance a nuclear power plant in Bangladesh in which billions of pounds was siphoned off. Now, this has been filed by a political opponent of the party, and the rebuttal is essentially that it is a smear. None of it has been basically verified, but Tulip Siddique is named in those court documents. So she has got the standards advisor in. She says that I think she seems confident that she'll clear her name, but she's not going to go to China on a trip with the Chancellor this week because she says she wants to stay behind to essentially assist the standards advisor. Especially awkward, as you pointed out just there, that she is the minister in charge of tackling things like financial crime, corruption and money laundering as well.
OK, Rob, thank you very much indeed. Rob Howell speaking to us there. Well, that story is sure to feature in tomorrow's papers. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be The Guardian's deputy political editor, Jessica Elgott, and also The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Alsam. So that paper review coming up later this evening. All right, let's chat to Kwasi and Sonia again, shall we? Look, she seems confident that she's going to clear her name. She's done the right thing, referring herself to the correct bodies. It's slightly embarrassing, though, Kwasi, right?
Very embarrassing. As you said, she is the anti-corruption minister. She deals with financial impropriety, money laundering, those sorts of things. And these, it would appear, are the very crimes or allegations that are being made against her. And I don't know who decided to refer her, or whether she decided herself to refer herself, rather, to Laurie Magnus and his committee. I think there would have been pressure from Downing Street. That's often what happens when ministers are in trouble. The PM or someone in number 10 says, I think it'd be a good idea if you referred yourself to the standards. So I don't know where that was coming from. But of course, I remember from our days in government, these reports, these investigations with Laurie Magnus, he did the Rob, it was a QC that did the Rob bullying thing, but of course the Nadim Zahawi with his tax affairs. This thing could, he could end up anywhere.
So they're very neutral, is what you're saying. You don't know what they will go for it.
I trust that he will go right to the bottom of what went wrong or what happened, and you just can't say now what the upshot of that will be.
How important do you think this kind of thing is? Is it kind of background noise, or is it something that actually could be more serious?
I think it depends on what these investigations find. I think it was absolutely the right... I think there had to be, there has to be an investigation into it because they are only allegations. I think it's important to say that. But they are very serious and they need to be investigated. And this stuff around the properties, we need to know about what was declared, whether any conflicts were declared. That is important. So we don't know yet, but they are important allegations to be looked into. It's the thing that I think is going to be tricky about this for Keir Starmer, and it comes back to, the whole thing we saw over the summer around kind of, the scandal around tickets and potential conflicts of interest in gifts and suits, etc. Keir Starmer ran on this promise that he was going to be very, very clean and bring a clean approach to politics. And people don't like hypocrisy in politics. So I think if there's any whiff around this, that some of these things might stack up,
That's right.
that will be really problematic.
So that's the
for
problem.
Starmer.
It's not that the crime or the allegations themselves are important, but what's more important is the standard to which he set himself in opposition. So they went after Boris Johnson because of the wallpaper, and then they were getting suits and tickets and all the rest of it. And so people do feel, well, hang on a minute, if you're going to be, say you're purer than pure, whiter than white, and you allow all the sleeves to go on, there's a problem there.
Thanks both very much. Allegations, we should say. She's obviously confident she's going to get her name cleared. Thanks both very much. Still to come on the Politics Hub.
Now, two sides from different worlds have one world to protect and keep their village from the brink of collapse.
Oh, amazing. Kemi Badenoch reportedly relaxes by playing Clash of Clans. Not exactly bringing the fight to Gwyneth Paltrow in the field of chilled-out wellness gurus there, but hey, if it works, don't knock it. So we thought we'd bring you our panel's tips for chilled-out 2025. That's next.
Once almost lost, these denizens of the deep are back. The problem for these whales is global warming. Water temperatures are rising.
We're worried that the animals are actually starting to starve.
Deadly and outdated. What do you think should happen to the nets?
I would like to see them go.
I'm Nicole Johnston, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Beijing. A towering monument to the China dream and its demise. From one end of this country to the other, China is littered with real estate that's falling apart. China is facing a tsunami of the elderly.
We have to work as long as health allows, otherwise, no money.
China is under pressure to pay for the pensions of 500 million retirees. I've reported on a wide range of stories from around the world. Mass protests forced the president to flee. The sight of the president's private swimming pool only reinforces to Sri Lankans the great divide here between rich and poor. Aid groups say Gaza is now the world's most dangerous place to be a child. The Israeli army has raided towns and villages all over the West Bank. These tunnels run all over Gaza. The Gaza Strip is ridden with them. The referendum designed to unite the country has only deepened its divide. Sydney's floodplains underwater again. This is the third or fourth time in the 18 months that their homes have gone under. Sky News, the full story first. It may seem like a gimmicky toy, but it is part of the global race between the United States and China for new technology. This elite engineering designed to humour and to help us.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, January is a time for New Year's resolutions, and lots of us are scrolling the Instagram accounts of the impossibly toned wellness gurus for calming, inspirational pathways to a better you. Not quite all of us, including me. And Kemi Badenoch has also sacked off the wheatgrass shakes and lotus position. According to press reports, she prefers to play video games like Clash of Clans to decompress. So in honour of the Leader of the Opposition, we thought we'd bring you a calming insight into what she does to chill out.
Now, two sides from different worlds have one world to protect and keep their village from the brink of collapse. But as sure as the ice cracks and the embers smolder, in the end, ice and fire will clash.
It's amazing. It's actually amazing. Let's talk to Kwasi and Sonia. I love this. Sonia, you tempted Clash of the Clans?
Well, the thing I kind of like about this is, like, you know, Kemi Badenoch's got this sort of reputation for being quite a combative, you know, politician. And, like, I was watching that and I was like, yeah, I can see Kemi Badenoch sort of getting really into that.
It's quite aggressive.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was very calming.
No. God, but if you want to sort of relax after a hard day in the office as, you know, Leader of the Opposition, it's like going into combat.
I think it's also she's got 3 quite young kids, and I think they probably introduced that game to her.
What about you? Clash of the Clans? This is the kind of
Not
thing
really
you do?
my thing. I like just maybe listening to a podcast or some
gosh,
music.
That's so cultured of you.
It's just,
the music and podcasts.
Yeah, and just sort of
not political podcasts.
No,
right?
and I mean I love history, so I like history podcasts. I like You know, was watching Wolf Hall, the second. I thought that was very good. But just sort of TV. But those video games, not only are they addictive, but they're quite stressful, actually.
Yeah.
When you're in them.
It was stressful to watch it, let alone be in control of it.
I don't see how you'll decompress playing that stuff.
We were talking about Candy Crush. I mean, that's
I used to
decompress.
That's right.
You used to be
Because
addicted
it's sort of
to that.
mindless.
But now, because I don't know if I should say this on TV, but I've got quite into poker in the last couple of years.
Oh, really?
And so
that's very stressful.
I have a poker app on my phone, not playing for money. It's just like a practice app. So if I'm on a train or whatever and I've got to spend, I'm like, let me just see if I can win a round of poker.
I think leaders. I mean, I remember when David Cameron was Prime Minister, he used to play. Was it Angry Birds?
Angry Birds.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that was his thing. So yeah, I mean, I can understand why people want to decompress.
Yeah,
it's just that the Clash of Clans did not look very calming.
It didn't look relaxing at all.
No, it didn't.
It didn't look relaxing at all. That's right. Yeah, I was talking to the team about how we all decompress. I mean, I don't. Just to have a glass of wine. I mean, is that acceptable? Is that acceptable to say? It's not a recommendation.
Or other popular streaming,
streaming
services.
Any other recommendations?
Also, it's very difficult now because you've got 24/7 culture. And when I first went to the House of Commons, Twitter wasn't really a thing. So you could just switch off. Whereas now, certainly over government, they were obsessed almost too much with social media and all of those sorts of things.
My resolution every year is always to read more books than I read the year before, because I do actually genuinely find reading, because it does focus your mind on something. Just
it's much more, it draws you in much more. You can't do other things while you're reading, whereas you can do other things when you're watching telly.
Yeah, I'm currently 2 screens. I'm really bad.
Yeah.
Any resolutions for the year then?
I think more reading. I'd like to travel more.
Mine's to go on more holidays, because I have this thing about New Year's resolutions that they should be about being nice to yourself instead of making yourself do really hard things. And so I think if you have a resolution which is to try and have more fun and go on holiday more,
I love this. Yeah. Everyone else is kind of dieting, jogging. You two are going on more holidays. I love it. That's great. I quite like it. Thanks both very much indeed. Great to have you on the first Politics Hub of the year.
Thank you.
That is it for us tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Up next, it's UK Tonight with Sarah J. Mee. And then, of course, at 9 p.m, You Have the World with Yada Hakeem. It's been great to have you with us again. Happy New Year. A bit late to say that, but I'm going to say it anyway. See you tomorrow.